All right, welcome, swimmers, swammers, ladies and gentlemen, and everything in between. Today, I am joined with two guests on the Swim Bros podcast. One that I'm very, very familiar with for over a decade at this point. Don Weatherwax of Sports Nutrition to Go, the first dietitian that I met and worked with, and also the CEO of Injoy, Luca Cuccia. I think I messed that up a little bit, but Luca's joining us now, and he's going to talk about a little bit about gut health and how it can help optimize the athlete's performance, how it can help optimize our entire health and livelihood and lifestyle. And really interested to hear Luca's journey, his process with Enjoy, and also discuss how we connected, how Luca and I connected, and how Don helped facilitate that process. So, Luca, thank you for joining us. Don, excited to be here with you today. But Luca, love to hear a little bit of why you want to do this with Enjoy, and where you came from, your process with the whole journey that you've been on to get to this point right now.
Definitely. And first and foremost, thanks for having me, Grant and Don. It's always great to see you. Um, but yeah, I mean, the journey began at quite a young age. You know, for me, I knew I always wanted to be in health in some way. Um, I was a cancer patient when I was young, so I thought I wanted to be a doctor. I went into emergency medical services. I studied science, became a researcher, worked in the lab. Um, but I think what I quickly realized is that I wanted to do something that would allow any type of discovery, any type of innovation to have the smallest amount of time between the idea first coming to be created to it actually making an impact on someone's lives. And for me, in my journey, the best way to do that was entrepreneurship. So it was in late 2019 that myself and a couple of other friends from my program at my university, we decided to come together and make a company. And as silly as that sounds, that really was how it began. We were all science people. None of us had the slightest lick of business inside of us, but we had some cool ideas. Initially, we knew we wanted it to be around the microbiome, and I've had friends in. And it's like kind of embarrassing, but it really was as simple as we have this cool idea. We don't really know how to build a business about it, but we think if it works, even in a basic degree, it's something that we could charge for. How much we charge for it, how do we even charge people for something in the first place? All that was basically, forbidden knowledge to science people. We're always focused on kind of like the lab environment. How many more samples do we run an analysis on? How many duplicates of a certain endpoint do we have to get before we're confident in seeing it? How much more performance can we get out of the culture that we're growing, whatever it might be. So entrepreneurship was a very, very big shift for us. But as I mentioned, we all of us had kind of an attachment to it. The microbiome was kind of like the academic aspect of things, but we also had like deep personal ties to wanting to move into intestinal health. My example being my friends and family who have Crohn's, who have colitis, who've been dealing with it for multiple decades of their lives, and kind of seeing what that means from having to miss events, with other family and friends, having to leave things early, having to be hospitalized, never having the concrete stability in knowing that your body's going to be able to handle the next meal you have. And this is also a perspective of people who live in different countries. I have family in Italy, I have family in the US, and seeing how the different medical systems are able to adapt to this. But the base of it is, at least in the form that we have today, and I'm happy to talk about kind of the early days, but today it's really how do we build something and combine these things that are microbiome testing, artificial intelligence, building intelligent companions for people, all with the goal of transforming that time that people spend into the bathroom into a more personalized journey of better health and a happier life. Because for me, at its core, Injoy, which stands for intestinal joy, it's all about empowering people dealing with the digestive health issues, really to regain control of their gut, and more importantly, get over what we like to call toilet guilt. All this stigma that's out there, people not willing to talk about intestinal health outside of more of the kind of like popular dietary fads you might see out there. But as soon as you talk about things, like diarrhea, constipation, people turn their heads and they act like it doesn't exist. But I can promise you, everyone in this call, everyone else that you've ever met, they've dealt with these issues, even if they're not willing to speak about it. And for some people, those issues are more than just a temporary inconvenience. They're a massive change in lifestyle. And being able to answer that question of, is this something temporary? Am I normal? Or is this something that's a major cause of concern? Is not something that we felt people should have to go to a hospital to be able to answer. And even people who have these issues and are diagnosed, let's say irritable bowel syndrome, let's say Crohn's disease, they shouldn't have to go to the hospital to monitor themselves, at least in a more objective fashion beyond just how they're feeling, the symptoms they're experiencing. And that was really the initial intention behind what we built. Starting out 4 years ago with only a microbiome test and saying that we could help people diagnose eventually conditions such as Crohn's and colitis, which we don't currently do, but that was the initial intention. All the way today, which is essentially an intelligent bathroom companion for anyone seeking to learn more about their gut, as well as those looking to take the next step in improving their care. So it's been a long journey for us, and over the 4 years, it's amazing how much things can change. But again, as we were talking a little bit before the stream began, it's the expectation that things are going to change over time, and you're going to put something out there and have to learn if it works basically while it's out there being experienced by people. But the hope is that years later, and currently where we find ourselves, is that risk you took, that step you took, that humility you have to put something out there that's not perfect, starts making a tangible impact on people's lives. And we're still early on, but it's really those messages that we receive from people that say, "Hey, what you gave me the strength and the confidence to go advocate for myself, to my practitioner, or even take the next step in trying something new with my diet, trying something new with my lifestyle." That makes a huge impact. And I'm sure as an athlete, and Dawn, yourself as a practitioner, that moment where something clicks, you find that routine in your diet, you find that regimen that gives you that extra bit of performance. Like, it's that click that tells you that change is possible, and these habit changes are going to make a difference. And then you're kind of getting started on your journey. But as long as it's a journey from the beginning, you have to put in work. I think a lot of people can stand to benefit from taking a better perspective and taking a better look at their gut health.
Yeah, I think that's incredibly powerful and incredibly inspiring. Honestly, there's a lot of, especially from like my peer group and my experience of just the outlook on the world. There's definitely a lot of growing options to solve the what and the how, but there's not a lot of solving the whys. There's a lot of solving the symptoms, but
Right.
there's not as many of the causes. And you spoke to it from a deeper why of experiencing it yourself at a young age, but also your family. That's a very powerful why. That's a very powerful intrinsic desire to create something that helps other people because you directly know what it is. And so that resonates a lot with me because um, I also have family members that have been affected by some gut distress, such as like ulcerative colitis, stomach ulcers, IBS as well. And where you see those tangible things, you hear about it, or I really didn't even know what, Crohn's disease was. I'd heard the name, but I never knew what it was. I definitely never heard of ulcerative colitis, but to really see that tangibly, to see like a family member, a relative, like lose tens of pounds over the course of days or weeks, have to go to the hospital, lose drive, energy, it's very compelling. It's pretty scary too. And to know that there are now like options and methods to, at least have a better idea of, what you're talking about, incorporating AI into understanding the gut health better. And we've talked about that on previous calls of, the algorithms that it can run, compiling data together to get better than just one or two people or a group of 10 people just brainstorming through it and having a collective on it, but really pulling as much data for the information that it's given is really powerful. And you said that you initially had the vision or the dream or aspiration for, solving aspects like Crohn's and ulcerative. Is that still like a driving force? And there's other obviously rungs on the ladder along the way, or is that kind of more far off right now for where you guys are currently at?
It's a great question, and I would say outside of the more technical goals that we have as a company, it's really the advocacy aspect, and I love that you say that. I'd never heard of ulcerative colitis, and that's unfortunate. These are problems that, as you know, millions of people are dealing with worldwide, but nobody talks about them. It's not like breast cancer, which is now something that is extremely positively, supported and discussed, and there's every single type of run and fair. It doesn't really exist for Crohn's and colitis because it's a bathroom condition. And that's not really a term that I'm super much of an advocate for, but it is how it's seen. So whatever we can do to change the conversation around intestinal health is really important. And to go back to kind of our initial starting point, um, to give you an example of why 5 scientists probably shouldn't be starting a company, the name of the company was Micropredictome, which we thought was just marvelous.
Yeah.
We thought, oh man, this is gonna get them. It did not. Most people couldn't even pronounce it. But essentially, what we were trying to do was change the way that these conditions are diagnosed, because as the issue being that people don't really speak about them, the main kind of entry point for people being diagnosed, and upwards of 60%, is once they're hospitalized, which is kind of a wild statistic to think about. Considering these are issues that start very early, in many cases, 3 to 5 years before a diagnosis, there are signs for it. It shouldn't get to the point of severity and extreme weight loss, Grant, like you mentioned, and bleeding and bloody stools and all these different things, before you start to even get to the point of what's going on here. So that was the idea with Micropredictome: is you send me a single stool sample, I can assess it. We sequence the samples. We have an artificial intelligence algorithm that can analyze the data that comes out of the sequencers, and we can say, do you have Crohn's and colitis or not? Churning what is currently, around 3 to 5 years of extreme discomfort, and of being told, oh, it's maybe just an intolerance. Oh, it's maybe something that is a phase you're going through. Let's see it over time. Maybe it's just in your head. Which is 3 to 5 years of not knowing what's actually going on with your body, to effectively 24-hour understanding. And that's something that we achieved. It's something that we're able to demonstrate. We were taking samples from our local area in Montreal of people who had Crohn's and colitis, those who were healthy. And without being aware of who was who, we were able to say which samples were classified as which individuals with a 96% accuracy. And that's when
96.
we knew. 96. So that was when we
Wow.
said to ourselves, okay, we have something here.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and this was around 30 people, right? So we're also being very mindful that, at those types of numbers, the stats are going to be better. Let's be very transparent. But it is a very strong signal that we're working in the right direction, and that we have, the more algorithmic capacity to push this even further. And that was Micropredictome, the diagnostic edge of things. But I think what we realized is that, one, bringing a tool such as ours to a FDA regulated diagnostic tool, Health Canada, diagnostic tool, it's not going to be free. And myself and my co-founder, who are both scientists and really, again, not a lick of business in us, we weren't going to be the ones to do it. So instead of making it take several years and a lot of funding to actually bring it to people and start making a difference in people's lives, we said, hey, let's turn this into a wellness company for now. Let's make it so that instead of a diagnosis being the output of our algorithm, we can tell people, how similar they look to others experiencing issues that they might be experiencing, whether it be Crohn's, colitis, irritable bowel syndrome, bloating, abdominal pain, diarrhea, constipation. And that was the first shift to our company called Phyla, where we brought in more digital health. We wanted to help people track their symptoms, track the medications they're taking, and then over time transition into what we are today, which is Injoy, which is really all about consistent engagement, turning the time that people spend in the bathroom into a moment to really reflect on their health, and engaging them in that moment with a small Bluetooth sensor so that we can see how your health is changing over time, which is really the key to it. Because health is life. It's a longitudinal thing. You don't work on it for one day and then you're all set. It's about changing your habits over a long period of time and finding what works out for you. So that's really the main focus of Enjoy today. It's outside of the empowering people with information and helping them understand what's going on in their bodies, in a way that's a lot more easy to understand outside of, you know, I'm bloated today. I'm dealing with discomfort today.
Yeah, no, I think that's great, and like you mentioned with the app, I want to toss it over to Don after I get this section. But I've been incredibly amazed at how seamless the app is, and we'll talk on it a little bit later. But yeah, it's really correlative into giving you insights. Like you said, it's you'd put a little monitor just behind, like on top of the toilet, and every time, like everyone goes in there with their phone now almost all the time, and so it's already there. And it's just like almost like a 1 minute questionnaire, just kind of subjective, like almost like little reminders to yourself of when you use the restroom, like how are you feeling, did you get good rest, are you feeling recovered in the morning, like at night, did you sleep restfully, like do you feel bloated, all these different things, just kind of checklists. And I've noticed, like when I'm not home or I don't have my phone, like I'm kind of taking those notes as well myself, like whether I'm at the pool, at training, after training, how's my body feel, what am I noticing, whether it's before training, during training, or after, if I'm away, if I'm traveling. And you start to put these things together, and especially as an athlete, like you talked about your routines, you definitely start to form these better understandings. And even for me, I've really paid attention to the aspect that it makes suggestions. Like you said, we've talked about the technology a lot and how important that aspect is to all of Enjoy, and really start to identify, like, okay, well, I keep having this food and I keep having this response, but it's like a couple hours delayed and I haven't really noticed it. But the Enjoy app really makes that correlation for you, like, hey, like this food keeps coming up, after you log it like 7 days, 10 days, start to get more of an understanding. The algorithm's a little bit stronger, and really understand making that connection. And so I think it's really interesting. I obviously know I have my experiences with it, and I want to see really from Don's perspective, you know, how many athletes, Don, have like come to you or have you engaged with that have like ulcerative colitis or Crohn's or something where it's really limiting to their performance, and in your perspective, how limiting is that for them?
Right. When people come in now, just if it was on the phone consultation or working with somebody face to face in that general consultation, I have asked for the last couple of years, do you have any constipation, diarrhea, bloatedness, any digestive issues? Because a lot of times they've had it for a while, they just it's their norm, and then I try to educate, well, that's not normal, that's your norm because you don't know any different. And as you both have talked about the stigma of about going to the bathroom, it's not one of those conversations you like, oh, how did you go today? I mean, how was your bathroom breaks? It's just not even something you bring up unless it's maybe your friends that are close by in the car at the same time that things are maybe not working very well, or after ice cream when somebody's lactose intolerant. People know what that means, because usually, if you don't know, that's when people can't break down the lactose in ice cream, but they still love it. So usually within an
Oh
hour
yeah.
or two, they're going to be on the toilet because that's just what it does, because they can't break it down and it causes gas sometimes. So your loved ones or the people around you suffer sometimes those consequences. And then, but what I find is it's a question that's not asked a lot. And then they'll even say sometimes, well, I have it sometimes. And I'm going, then a red light goes on. I go, that's not still okay. You're a major athlete, Grant, and some have it around the activity. Maybe they're fine any other time, but they do have it around the activity. that could be just nervousness. But again, I go, what's going on? What's happening? Because you could have actual allergy to that food only during the activity. It's very rare. I've had only 2 athletes where it's almost like exercise induced asthma, but it's exercise induced food allergy, but it only happens around the activity. And so when you log on the Injoy app, you might notice that. The more endurance an athlete does, the more apt they'll have, tummy issues, gut issues, digestive issues, because that intensity, the longevity of that activity, especially in long endurance, but swimmers swim a lot for a long time. You're the only sport. It just amazes me. Anybody who does not know swimming, even at a young age, right, Grant? I mean, how old were you, Grant? I'm going to interview you. When you started swimming, what was your first memorable moment of swimming?
Yeah, I think my first, I think I started competing when I was 8 competitively. I know I was in the pool long before that, but the East
Yeah.
Central Swim Team mini meets were
See,
my first memory there.
right? And tell the audience how long you were in the pool at one time swimming at age 8 in practice.
Yeah, for perspective, like Don's getting at here, the race I was doing at age 8 was about maybe 25 seconds for one lap down the
Right?
pool,
But
and the
practice time.
practice time is about an hour, anywhere from an hour to 2 hours. I think at age 8 it was probably an hour per day, but still, like the
Okay.
ratio of that is even more pronounced now, to where I'm 25 and my event profile is different. But even in the guys that are doing 50 meters, so that takes the world's best can do it in about 21 seconds.
Right?
We're doing two-hour sessions a day still, and there are obviously things that facilitate that structure and their training more specifically, but the ratio that Don's kind of getting at is absurd compared to any other sport. Like, you take a track athlete and have them do that, it makes no sense. It's
Right?
interesting, very interesting.
But then it starts to correlate with your sport that digestive issues are even more likely, because it's the only sport that you warm up in the water. Everybody else, like, let me jog, or okay, I'm going to warm up a little bit, I'm going to stretch on dry land, right? You like are in the water for 60 minutes to 2 hours with not a lot of break. And that can break down your permeability or how your gut digests. It affects that. And that's why over the course of many years now, I ask about digestive health, and I really try to get at the bottom of what it is. And that's why I seeked out Luca, because I spoke at a conference and somebody just came up and showed me Luca's information, and he got us connected. And I was so excited because I'm about science, and I'm about how can we measure this versus how do you feel? That's one thing. But how can we start to get, as Grant mentioned at the very beginning, the why? What is the why? What can we get so you don't have this anymore, if we can get to that point? And many athletes have issues. I believe more swimmers have more issues than most athletes. And if the audience was listening, who can swim an hour now? I cannot swim an hour at 8. If I can swim it now, I bet I could do it when I was 8, but most people can't even do what you're asking these 8-year-olds to do, let alone yourself, without a kickboard or some floaties. But that's what it really does, can impact their health. And that's where I'm at. I like science, and I want to find a way to measure it so we can help people better and perform their best to the goals that they're trying to achieve.
Yeah, I think that's great insight too, especially the perspective on, like, I always say we train aerobically, but a lot of our sport is anaerobic. A lot of the
Mhm.
events last under, I mean, they're 200 meters, 200 meters down. There's only a select few that go 400 meters, 800 meters into a mile. And so it's really an interesting aspect for swimming as a whole. But Don brought up something, Luca, that I one of the ones I'm most interested to engage with, and I've dealt with a lot, especially particularly when I started with Don. There was actually like an instance where I was swimming the 500-yard freestyle, and it had happened in like practices sometimes, but I was like 300 yards into the race, very like high sustaining effort and intensity level for about 4.5 minutes, 4 minutes, from 4 minutes to 4.5 minutes at like a very wide elite level range. But you're maintaining that at high intensity for a very, very good amount of time. And I remember I got to like the about 150 meters left, and I was like I had to go to the bathroom like right now, and my stomach just had so much distress. It was something that I had like at the end of a really intense practice before, or when training volume's really high. And I was gonna bring it up later too, but a couple of my teammates have like asked this throughout my career, whether it's in high school, college, but they're like, "Hey, when you're doing like a really hard endurance set or aerobic practice," or some of them even said, like for a really just exhaustive practice, maybe it's not aerobic, but it's weight training, strength training, where you're really taxing your body. Do you have any like stomach distress, gut distress, like where things are just kind of off kilter, off the routine, like you talked about already earlier, in like your bowel movements, in your digestive process, in your digestive system? And I feel like it's one of the most commonly known things, especially for endurance sports, like Don talked about. But why? Like, what is the causation behind that, Luca? Like, what's really causing that to happen, other than us just pushing our bodies to a farther limit than normal?
Yeah, it's an excellent condition, and I think for me, what I'm most familiar with knowing it is as runner's diarrhea, actually, where
Yeah.
it's this idea of this type of endurance, which we know that most people aren't doing typically on a day-to-day basis. It fundamentally changes the body. When you push your body to this length, your digestion doesn't become the top priority of the body. It's your respiration, it's your circulation. So a lot of that can mean, the shunting of blood away from the gastrointestinal tract. That can mean that you can have some lack of muscular control of your bowels. You can have incontinence. You can have these different things. For some people, it can be as severe as after a marathon, they can barely eat anything. Like anything that they eat, it's almost like they have a severe allergy to. They'll have diarrhea, they'll have like allergic reactions on their skin because there is a big balance between your inflammation, your immune system, and your digestive tract, and even blood coming out of the body. But a lot of it just comes down to your body makes a shift in terms of what is the most important use of our resources right now. And when you're pushing yourself as hard as you can, as you know, it's your breath and it's your circulation, it's your heart rate. So that's really it at the simplest level.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, I think most athletes that really push themselves, especially, like you said, marathon, like running, track, not always the field events, but like track, distance running, cycling as well, too, swimmers. It really can be, when you push yourself and exhaust yourself, pretty intense, and definitely like alarming from that. And
Yeah.
I've definitely met a couple athletes. Like one of my relatives was a swimmer as well, and like he didn't have, going undiagnosed for years. They didn't know about it until really the end of their career. And looking back, it's like, yeah, I got out of the practice to use the restroom like really urgently a lot, and I just thought it was like Don indicated, just like my normalcy. And really like, okay, well, if I knew I had this, then like what could I have done? Or
Mm-hmm.
what could I have
Yeah.
fixed, or what could I have improved? And I think that just taps into even like quality of life for so many people. And so for anyone like experiencing that distress, those gut issues, what are like three things that you would recommend? Obviously take an Enjoy test. That would be the first go. But
Step
besides,
number one.
yeah, besides that, order it and make it an Enjoy test. But outside of those, what would be three things that you would recommend to help alleviate or, rectify those aspects, those issues?
Certainly, certainly, and I also really just want to compliment you, Don, because you, that example of people not realizing what is normal versus not is like a weekly discussion that I have with people. It's just like, what do you mean? I've gone to the bathroom 5 times a day for the past 2 years. And it's like when things become consistent, they become normal, but that doesn't mean they're correct, unfortunately. So I think a very big thing that we do is, the answers are inside of you. We're just helping translate them effectively, and that's the big importance aspect of testing. But when it comes for the tips for better gut health, very honestly, they're not groundbreaking. I think the most important aspect of them is that they require habit change. So whenever I like to talk about these tips, it's things that when you look at them on a piece of paper, they're rather simple, but doesn't mean they're easy, because it's shifting from things that you might have consistently been doing for a long time. But first and foremost, it's to make sure you're eating the right foods. And I don't think I have to say anything to this group about that. But I think in terms of, yeah, I mean, go ahead, Dawn, if you'd like.
Oh, I was just gonna chime in. You guys will love this fact, or a quiz. I'll give your audience a quiz and you a quiz. What percent of men and what percent of women get their daily dietary requirements in? What percent? What do you think? The percent of women and men get their daily fiber percentage in a day. What do you think? Grant, I'll let you go first because you're the host. So what do you think?
I definitely say, just in general, men probably get lower than the women.
Well, that's a go. Bingo on that. Bingo.
Okay.
But come on, give me a percent. Yeah, give me a
say-
percent. The women want it. Yeah.
I'll say like
But
probably 45% of guys, and for women 60%. I'll go 60%.
Luca, you probably already know this. What do you think, though? Do you know? This is what
Honestly, I don't know the exact percentage, but the percentage I always focus on is the fiber one.
Yeah. So guess what?
Like less than 5% are getting out.
You are so guess what? 3% of men only meet the dietary guidelines for fiber. 3, and women 10. 10.
Yeah.
And I'll let you take over, Luca. But I just thought I would share that fact of why we have a lot of issues there.
That's the difference wild fact.
Yeah, that's the difference between Luca being an expert and me just being the athlete trying to figure this out. Is I was off by a multiplier of 40, 10 by 40 to 10 times, and he almost put it perfectly in the middle. So there we go.
Yeah. And I was like, well, 97% of your competition, Grant, is not eating enough fiber, and the females, like 90% of your competition are not meeting their fiber goals, right? So there you go.
Yeah. And again, like that's where a lot of these, let's say, diet styles come into play. Like the Mediterranean diet, I think, is the easiest one for people to look up and kind of understand what it's about. But a lot of it comes down to rich in fruits, vitamins, rich in vegetables, fiber, rich in nuts, good fats. All of that is extremely important, and varying these types of things. There's not just one type of fiber. Consuming different types of fats, having meat, but limiting, red meat, having fish, all these things are really good. And it comes down to really important, balancing it. But fiber is core to that. And I would say outside of fiber, and I'm so glad you brought that up, because fiber is one of those things where if you're not consuming enough of it, for some people, maybe a supplement is a good start. I think food is always the best, therapy when it comes to these things, because you get so much more than just that one ingredient. You get all the nutrition that's attached to it, and hopefully it's delicious as well. But I can't tell you how many people, I've told, why don't you try out a psyllium husk supplement? Try it out for a couple of weeks, see how it goes. And that's just one form of fiber. But for so many people, that can lead to a reduction. There's a scale for stool consistency that goes from all the way up to 7. 7 being very loose, and 1 and 0 being, extremely tough, like constipation. It can bring people down to like a 6 and 7, down to a 3 and 4, which is kind of ideal in the matter of weeks, just because there's more bulk in your stool. It's able to, dehydrate enough that it comes out, more pleasantly, let's say. But yeah, having the right foods is extremely important. Making sure you're getting enough fiber is extremely important. On top of that, I always recommend fermented foods as well. Those being foods that contain both probiotics as well as prebiotics. So essentially the bacteria as well as the food that that bacteria likes to consume. And eating the fermented foods as a whole is also great because there's so many compounds that are produced during fermentation that are good for us. I love kombucha. I make my own. Kefir is great. Yogurt is great. Kimchi. I mean, if you saw our fridge, it's like 5 containers of kimchi on a single shelf. All of these things are really great. Obviously, some people, you got to make sure you start slowly because, fiber, especially if you're not accustomed to it, you want to make sure you build it up over time. And then outside of that, it's kind of the things you would expect. It's make sure you get enough sleep, make sure you get enough exercise, make sure you're avoiding processed foods, high sugar, high fat. Artificial sweeteners are not great for you. Your body was not designed to break them down, so everything you can do to avoid those is better. And really start to think about foods on kind of like a dietary inflammation scale. What is pro-inflammatory? Processed foods, high sugar, fat. Whereas what is a little bit more anti-inflammatory? Let's say very generically, ginger, garlic, things like that. But I think everyone knows that. So it's not really an informational barrier that I think exists. It's more of a habit change barrier. And being willing to say, okay, I'm going to start incorporating one of these two things into my diet. And then over time, I'm going to start to see the effects of it. And then I'm going to get more serious about it. And then all of a sudden it becomes routine. Hopefully the normal that you start to experience is a good one. And that's when people start to really reap the benefits of it. But yeah, I would say those are the core recommendations for good gut health.
And can I add one more? I think he also hydration, right? So that's huge. And 76%, I love stats. So 76% of athletes show up to a morning practice or competition or school already 1% dehydrated and 66% all the rest of the other time. So just getting that moving and hydration. And I will also add, and maybe Luca could add on to it with that tummy issues during the swimming or the running events, is I find when my athletes don't eat enough or drink enough, because they're always in fear of that happening, it's the lack of sometimes why there's not enough fluid or nutrition that's helping them. I found that a lot of my digestive issues get better if they're eating enough and hydrating enough. And obviously eating enough, you don't want to just give permission to eat more ice cream and Sour Patch Kids and Blizzard or whatever we like out there, or saturated fat. So when Luca was talking, when he says fats, he's meaning saturated fats. So saturated fats are solid at room temperature. That's butter, that's margarine, anything that's solid, that it, like when it's not heated anymore, it's solid, right? So, but fried foods like French fries, once they're cooled, they're pretty gross. Usually that turns that into a saturated fat, but healthy fats are different. And that's I wanted to clarify that too. So, but I don't know if you found that, but I found that a lot of times issues get better if they hydrate better, along with eat enough of the right things.
That's awesome. Yeah, yeah. Go ahead, and if you feel like you want to riff on that more, Luca, or what Don spoke about. But I thought that was an incredible add-on. I think it's a really great aspect of, what the Injoy app I've found does, because I was interested to see how it worked. But I mean, Luke and I met. I had an understanding about it. But when I really started to set up the device and go through the process of using the app, it really combines. It's not just all facts. Man of science. I think we're all science buffs here, but I'm an EQ guy most of the day too. But it really does a great job of all the metrics that it tracks are one objective, like how much did you eat, how much of what did you eat, and then there's also some subjective recording as well. So it's a really good bond of facts and feelings. It's not just exclusively facts over feelings or always just being too over emotional or reactive or subjective. but it really combines those two aspects together. And I think that's a really powerful aspect to combine together.
And can I ask a question to you, Luca? And I know your viewers are going to absolutely love this question. What should poop look like? Like, what's good poop look like?
That is an excellent question.
My 10-year-old will always look at his poop, and I'm like, I do not want to look at that. He's like,
But that's
no,
healthy.
look at
You know,
this. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to throw up. I can't. I think that's another
I
thing
like
we have
that.
to get over. We
It's
have to
one of
get
those
over that
things.
too. Yeah. So tell us what our poop should look like, Luca, because I want to know what good
I'm
poop
telling
looks
you,
like.
it's on that scale. It's that scale. If you want to look up and if you want to look up, you can.
We
If you
got
don't
a
want to,
picture.
that's also totally fine.
Yeah.
But the Bristol stool scale, that's really the defining scale of what consistency your stool should be. And
Okay.
essentially a type 4 is perfect. So
Type 4.
smooth,
Okay.
a singular piece, ideally, without any cracks in it. And ideally, it comes out in kind of that prototypical S shape just because of kind of how it falls into the toilet bowl. But the most consistent thing is you want it to be smooth, you want it to be one piece, and you don't want it to have cracks. More cracks is kind of representative of lower hydration, and multiple pieces is more indicative of a more diarrhea-like state. So that tends to be more dietary related. But yeah, type 4 is the ideal one. But I'm glad you bring that up. I mean, first of all, kudos to your 10-year-old for not having any shyness looking at the stool.
I know they don't know any better, and I'm like, well, he's doing what he should be doing, right?
Yeah,
like, look at your poop.
and it's a funny thing because when you do our test, you have to interact with your stool. There's no getting around it. We like to think we have one of the easiest possible ways to do that. But I think more importantly, I've had people message me and they say, you know what, that was way easier than I have ever thought it could be. And even more important to me is people who are diagnosed, let's say they have Crohn's, and they've done plenty of stool tests. They've experienced it all. The way they are normally taking a sample is, put a garbage bag over a trash bin and poop into it. Maybe have a bucket over your toilet, go into the bucket and then it smells, and then you have to put it in your freezer and all these things. We don't want any of that. We want to make it as easy as possible for people to get over the hump of, I'm going to have to interact with my stool. And I even have a relative that took our test, and she called me and she said, you know what, I feel like I connected with myself on a deeper level when I when I was doing this test. But yeah, it's one of those things where everybody poops, everyone pees, but we never really talk about it.
Exactly.
Which is kind of wild to think about. And there's just so much information. There's so much that we can learn about ourselves just simply by investigating this habit that we have. Everybody goes to the bathroom. There's no getting around it. There are very few things that unite all of us like that. So helping people make it as easy as possible to do so is certainly the key.
Yeah. Thank you.
We all poop. Everyone
all
does
poop.
it. So it's just a fact of life. It's a fact of life. And and I think you both kind of talked about it a little bit. It really sounded like to me when you're going through the list of things that really benefited, things that are more detrimental, things that are more harmful. One, it sounded like in general a lot of excess is more detrimental, and a lot of moderation is more beneficial. But you kind of hinted at it, like high sugar, high fat, low hydration. Like, or would you say those are the three biggest things that would lead to more gut distress and lower health in your gut, or are there other factors that are more prevalent for those indications?
I mean, those are all extremely critical. And I mean, I tend to have a saying that, everything in moderation as well as moderation, just because I think if you're too strict about these things, it can sometimes work against you. If you're stressed about making sure you're eating the right thing or not all the time, that's also not beneficial. Because I think one of the problems is we tend to think about health in a very compartmentalized way. it's not just what you eat. It's about your mental health. It's about your bathroom habits, about your exercise, about your sleep. All these things are very, very deeply connected. Um, and that goes down to all the athletic benefits of gut health, right? It's your immune function, it's your reducing susceptibility to infection, it's inflammation, it's tissue repair, all these different types of things. And none of that is improved if you only focus on one aspect of your well-being. So like we were talking about before, exercise is stressful, so it's really crucial, especially in athletes, to maintain that balanced approach to both exercise and nutrition, let's say. um, Especially when it comes to intense and sustained exercise, want to avoid those negative effects, make sure that you're avoiding any permeability and types of inflammation, which we all appreciate very deeply. But nutrition, wellness from a mental health perspective, hydration, all these are core tenets of it.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we kind of started to dip into was really an aspect that I think Don probably got frustrated with me in high school about, but I finally came around, and I feel like in my head I have rationalization for it. But
Uh-oh.
um,
What
she
is
would
it? You got me wondering what
That's
it
on the
is,
hook.
Grant.
So it would always be you're talking about like what things are ideal for like the gut health and what
Oh,
things during the intense exercise. And so when you were talking about that, Luca, it made me kind of think about what I'm digesting. And then Don talked about hydration at the meet or before practices. What I've really started implementing. And when I was really younger, always Gatorade, lemon lime Gatorade through and through. It
Hmm.
was probably part of my blood at that point. And then I went to the dentist and they're like, you drink a lot of Gatorade, don't you? Stop like drinking as much as you do. So I was like, okay, that was way too much. Now I took it away. And then I just didn't really have anything for a while. And then I would always just worry about post workout nutrition. And then when I was working with Dawn, she introduced me like to like other alternatives, like either goos or gummy items, or mainly Vitargo, which
yeah, I
was
like the
very
target.
like very digestible item, and it wasn't as sugary, it wasn't as chalky, and it didn't really upset my stomach as much because it didn't have
Mhm.
those sugar alcohols or those processed
Yes.
items
Or
that
just sugar.
yeah,
Just a
that
lot.
Powerade
Yeah.
and Gatorade have a bunch of.
Mhm.
And so, one thing that I really struggled with though was actually just like being able to handle that amount of carbs, that amount of like fuel while I was working out. And so the first couple times I would take it, I would just be incredibly uncomfortable, and I was like, I just can't do this. Like it might be beneficial, but it was almost like I had to build a tolerance for that over time, to where now like I can destroy like 2 scoops of Vitargo in like half my practice, just because my body's utilizing the carb source more efficiently now than ever before, and I'm healthier. I feel like I'm healthier than ever before as well too. But it took a while to actually be able to absorb and handle that load of carbs on my digestive system. And also now I've noticed if I because when I started college, I was like, well, we're sponsored by Powerade at ASU. I don't really like how that makes me feel, even though I know it's important. And I don't want to be like eating a banana in the middle of a 2-hour workout where I'm breathing super hard, because that's going to end up in the trash can. And so Vitargo really became this thing. I was like, I gotta figure it out now. And slowly I've gotten to this point where I have that, and from Gnarly Nutrition, another supplement like Fuel 2O, but it's basically just
Mhm.
a very, very easily digestible carb source. And it makes my practice performance exponentially better, my meet performance and recovery exponentially better. But what is that factor that kind of is impacting that ability to digest carb sources for athletes at a fast rate? Is there a tolerance that you have to build up? And is there a limit and a max that athletes need to be concerned about? Because I know when I started using Vitargo, I almost lost all the taste or incentive to do Gatorade or Powerade, to where now I can only like swish it in my mouth. Like if I digest it, my body's like, yeah, this should not be there anymore. And it's become more adjusted to less additives, items like Vitargo and Fuel 2O, which yes, those still have additive aspects into it, but you can only it
Same.
mitigates the response. But but yeah, I use Vitargo a lot more now, Dawn. I
I
use the
know.
field
I
oil.
was like, because he did not like to eat during practice or his big meets.
Mm.
And I was like, okay, over time, we have to work through that because you're not going to perform well at some point if you can. And then I knew something was wrong. But yes, I had to push Grant a little bit, but he came around. But that's what we do is we all push a little bit. So, but
Absolutely.
I will say
Absolutely.
too, I know Luca will answer, but goos and gels can be pretty rough because they have a lot more like glucose, fructose, sucrose, and that's way more added sugar, even though it's a glucose, fructose, sucrose. And your Vitargo is a powder base, and it's just formulated to get in, and that really makes a huge difference. And I think even that, and then Gatorade and Powerade, again, they're different formulations. There are different brands out there, osmolarities. You can get into a lot of things there, but I think when you get rid of all the extra stuff that it and how they're made, it does make a difference on how your gut can absorb over time. And then it's a fluid source as well, right? When you drink Vitargo, it's drinking. Goos and gels are pretty thick. Like you said, a banana, just not going to even think about digesting that while you're swimming that hard. And just to let the viewers know, it there really is a difference too when you have a finicky stomach to find that way. I want to do a side note to that because sometimes these products could be made right with corn, or if they use a maltodextrin from rice or corn. And people, what we haven't hit upon, and we definitely could be another series altogether, is that you can have food allergies or sensitivities as well that are causing these gut issues. And that's another podcast with all three of us in the future. But that's also sometimes when you do everything and you're still going, I'm not sure what's going on. There really can be some food allergies or sensitivities to foods that are causing the tummy to be upset in that lining of the gut. And that's a whole nother podcast or issue, but that could be a problem as well. But Luca, what would you say about the Vitargo or other carbs to digest and Grant building it up as he
I
swims?
mean, a lot of it has to. I mean, first and foremost, I think what we're talking about is like finding out what works for you at a personalized level. Because for some people they can tolerate, some people they can't, and that's very deeply important. It's the same reason we don't really have, like, let's say, 3 buckets of recommendations we give. If you're in this corner, you get only these ones. If you're in this corner, you get these ones. No, it's really deeply dependent on who you are. But I mean, talking about it from the microbiome perspective, different carbs, different fibers. You want to make sure that your body has time to adapt to it because it's a new form of nutrition. It's something new for it to break down. Fiber is a very easy example because increasing the fiber intake slowly allows your bacteria to adapt, allows you to better handle it, helps minimize any type of discomfort you might be having. But also making sure you're hydrating well throughout it is extremely important because these things absorb a ton of water. So whenever you're eating new carbs, new fibers, especially, if you want to have nice stools, if you want to have that type 4 Bristol stool, you need to make sure you're drinking enough water because all of these supplements really can just like absorb everything up like it's nothing. But yeah, it's that slow change over time, and of course, like you're saying, Dom, sometimes you can't. Sometimes you're missing an enzyme. That just means that you functionally will not be able to break these different things down. But there are lots of things that we eat that we ourselves actually aren't capable of digesting. We're leaning on our bacteria to actually break it down into simpler forms that our body can then handle. Fibers being a very, very clear example of that. And even just the level of nutrition, there's so much that the bacteria in our bodies do for us outside of just breaking down the food. They're producing vitamins, they're interacting with our immune system, which is kind of like how it is indirectly impacting the rest of the body. But like we were saying before, when we were talking about our tips and our diet recommendations, it's making sure you give your body time to adapt because it's learning. Otherwise, it gets kind of scared, and its immediate reaction is let's just flush it all out. But if you take things in a slower manner, you'll have a much better time.
Yeah, and it's been super impactful, like I said, my performance and on recovery as well. Just my coach, Herbie Bame, after practice the other day talked about, making sure we're refueling properly. And it's not just about the work we're doing in the pool, but, also calming that down after practice. And I found a lot of success of, whether it was a supplement or also just paying attention and listening to my body. Sometimes after a session, you mentioned it in the middle of the podcast at this point is some people just don't like to eat afterwards. And I'm not always like that. I'm typically I have a pretty good appetite most of the time, being a large mammal like I am. And but I know some people and some swimmers that go far and beyond. Like our distance swimmer, he does the most yardage. He does the 10K, the 25K open water. Like he's swimming for hours on end. And one of their big thing is just how much like fuel they can get in basically like 10 or 15 seconds as they're swimming just on their back, and they have like a feeder they have to grab and do it really quick. One of the athletes, I hope I'm okay to say this, but that I know works with Dawn,
Yeah,
Mariah
it's okay.
Denigan.
Yeah.
Mariah
Yeah.
Denigan, she is an incredible athlete, and she goes hours swimming in the open water. But he will always tell me, I'm like, hey, did you eat enough, man? And he's like, I just like I will in like an hour, but like I just can't right now.
Mhm.
Is that just like the body just like saying we need to recover right now? Just we kind of like everything just went to alarm mode, or why is that? Because I've had that at some points, but not all the time. And I've taken things like glutamine after a workout that have really helped it. Like with the protein powder or carb source. But glutamine is one of the things that has really helped me after workouts whenever I'm experiencing that, or kind of re-regulate it a little bit better so I'm not having as much issue with it.
Mhm. It's it comes down to the idea we were speaking before, that the body and the gut is not an isolated system, so when you feel nervous and you feel butterflies in your stomach, that's not an accident. That's communication between your GI system and your brain. It's a similar thing that's occurring here. After a workout, your first priority, and it depends. Again, this will differ person to person. It won't necessarily be nutrition. Maybe it's going to just be making sure that your heart rate comes down to more stable levels so that the body can move into the recovery phase. Maybe then it's hydration. Maybe then it's nutrition. For other people, Grant, in your case, it seems like get me the food as quickly as possible is more of the situation. I'm more like your colleague. I tend to not be starving after I do a workout. I need like that half an hour, 1 hour before like my appetite comes back, and then I can eat a horse. But it will differ to person, and I wouldn't say it's an exact science. It's really something that will differ person to person, but it's your body letting you know what it needs next. And I think that's something that's super important when it comes to health is, and I think most people with intestinal health issues are quite good at this, is really listening to your body, starting to identify the signals that are there. That might be a little bit hard to recognize when you're busy and you're going about your daily life, and that could mean making sure you're breathing properly, being aware when you're fatigued and actually doing something about it, figuring out when you have a craving, that means you're lacking something, and you have to get over the mental barrier of like the poor quick access foods that are kind of available, and find another source of nutrition that will give you so much more and make you feel so much more fresh afterwards. But I just, to be honest, I just have the image of your friend swimming and trying to eat while he's swimming, and then that's just like mind blowing. I never really considered that as a thing. I don't
Yeah,
even know what you consume in that situation,
Really
but
it's
crazy to
it's
watch.
hectic.
that's crazy.
You have to watch them. One time in open water, and they just get to this thing, and I don't even. I'm trying to get my brain around what can be done in that amount of time to be successful, but then they have to go again, right? It's like a NASCAR pit stop. Like they just have to
Yeah,
like
Yeah,
stop, take it, but then they have to zoom. Like you're going,
incredible.
what is this mess? I don't,
yeah, and
and
they'll
it's
only
really
typically get about like half of it in. Like it's it makes me want, because obviously the name of the game, like that's a great analogy, like a NASCAR F1 pit stop. Like
it's
Yeah.
like
it's really like about the time efficiency of it. But I really wonder, as I get more into exercise physiology and like
Mhm.
just maximizing sprint performance, obviously, open water's on the other end of the spectrum there, but success leaves clues, I like to think about. And I almost wonder if it would be more beneficial to like, okay, I'm going into the event. I know I'm going to take 20 seconds here just to like stop. Cause I mean, these guys there's literally like a stick they hold out and the drink will be on the end of the stick and they just grab it as they go. And then they'll just float on their back. And then they're just trying to drink it basically within like 5 seconds. And then they typically won't even finish it. And they just throw it off to the side. And sometimes like other athletes like knock it out of the way. Like they'll knock the other athlete's feed out of the way, which is wild. The only like physicality that swimming has, which I think is hilarious. But it's amazing that how quickly they like at least perceive that they have to get it in. But it is wild to see. I mean, because they're really the only sport or the only aspect of sport where one
Yeah.
that's allowed, but two that's really required because everything else is at at the most in the pool under 15 minutes. And if you're fueling
Right.
adequately before, leading up to, and after, then you'll be fine during that. The body will figure out how to do that. But when you're swimming for hours on end and thousands of meters on end,
That's insane.
In
definitely a new
currents.
stimulus.
Like they're in a current too. Like sometimes when you watch them, it could be cold water, it could be hotter water. They could be wearing and then they have to. Sometimes you can see them when they hit a current. You're just like, okay, that does not look like fun. But they still have to digest. I am struggling with it too. I'm not sure what the answer is. But
And in this time, like your body's doing absolutely everything it can to produce more energy for you, right? So it's like even with that little bit, it's pushing all your glycogen stores. It's upregulating everything in your liver to even produce more glucose. And like by nature, that's going to suppress the opposite side of things. If that's your appetite, that's ghrelin. One of these other um, hormones that exist in the body, and that's going to basically just be blunting everything that's working in the opposite direction. So it's at these like really really high endurance levels is you really start to see how bipolar the systems in the body are. Um, that rest versus run type of aspect of things. That fight, that flight. These two systems are completely disconnected, and it's really in these situations where it leans very heavily to one side as opposed to kind of like the balanced nature you might find throughout the day.
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. I think that's a really great note to end on for this section, this episode. I think that's plenty of poop on the podcast today for everyone
Plenty,
listening.
I love that poop
Um,
on the
plenty.
pod. Poop
yeah,
on the
yeah,
pod
plenty, and
podcast.
a necessary amount for sure. But Luca, and Don, I'll have you go first or end with Luca. But where can people find you? Where can they reach out to you, Don, if they want to find out more about dietitian work, or working with you or regulating their nutritional aspects, whether old, young, or just starting into athletics or not athletics? Where can they reach out to you?
Yeah. So basically, sports nutrition to go, www.s for sports and for nutrition, the number two, and the letter G for sports nutrition to go. And that's my consulting and services there locally and internationally. Work with anybody who's trying to get healthy, but focus a lot between 6 and 18. And then I have my collegiate and elite athletes and the weekend warriors. But I also have my Don Weatherwax Sports Nutrition Academy. So that's pretty new. And that's for teams, clubs, organizations looking for a really economical resource, quick, easy, turnkey to provide my sports nutrition information to their teams very quickly and use my brain with their school or club. And that's also just go to sn2g.com and it's Dawn, like Dawn liquid soap, and weather outside and wax the car. So Dawn Weather Wax at Sports Nutrition to Go and Dawn Weather Wax Sports Nutrition Academy. Thank you for
Awesome.
this time, Grant and Luca. It's great to connect again.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and simple. I like it straightforward like that. And Luca, for you, where can the listeners find out, I guess, more about Enjoy, and also order
Yeah.
and get their own test kits to start monitoring and tracking their gut health to find more health solutions.
Definitely, definitely. And it's as simple as if you Google Injoy, Injoy, gut health, you'll definitely be able to find us. Our website is www.enjoy.bio. And on there, you'll find plenty of stuff besides our microbiome tests. We have a free tool on our website that allows you to ask any intestinal health question you could possibly think of, and get answers purely from our database of peer-reviewed literature, so you can really trust it. Making sure you don't have to search the internet for information that you don't know where it's coming from. And of course, our blogs and everything there, because as you guys know, education is super important, and informational sources as well as microbiome testing is all part of that.
Awesome. Awesome. And again, going back to that facts and feelings aspect there, but a lot of science backing this. That's why I really wanted to bring both Don and Luca on, both definitely professionals valuing the data, the science behind it, instead of a lot of woo-woo stuff, and really just pinpointing the exact markers they want. And, as someone who's using Enjoy right now, how seamless the product is. I've been pretty amazed at that. I mean, it just fits into the process of my daily activities at this point.
Right.
So, and if anything, it makes me more mindful in my day
Right.
and how I go about these processes in it. So, I'm really excited to when I've already gone through the first phase of my testing kit and my collection process. And I guess the data collection is on the way, and works on basically for everyone. You get the kit, you take the test samples over a couple days, and then you send them back out for Enjoy and Luca's group to collect the sample and test it and get some results. And so next episode we'll have back on will be, reviewing those results and also discussing what they mean, what needs to change, what doesn't need to change, what's good, what's bad, and what can be improved on, and just kind of reviewing those a little bit and what it means for myself as the athlete. So I appreciate both of you in my life and helping me on this journey, this journey of improvement in athletics. But appreciate both of you joining me today, especially to help, ideally improve the lives and health and wellness and performances of all the listeners and individuals here. So thank you both.
No, thanks so much, Grant. That's wonderful to hear, and we have a lot of updates coming. So I'm excited to hear what you think of those as well. But really, really thankful that you appreciate us as part of your journey.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank
Cool.
you all for listening. Please leave a 5-star review. It really helps me connect with experts like Don and Luca and spread the word. We're trying to make people live healthier lives. We're trying to solve diseases out here on the podcast now and improve performance below that as well. So, 5-star review helps. Tell your friend, tell your mother, tell your father, tell your best friend about it. And let's get the word spread about the Swim Bros podcast and Enjoy and Sports Nutrition to Go. So thank you for listening. Hope you enjoy the rest of your day and live life daily.